Stocks slip with declines far exceeding advances. Utilities and energy are the big drags, weighed by Adani Group counters, while IT and Realty remain resilient.
Adani Group managers and associates, including Gautam Adani, have been charged by a New York District Court and the Securities and Exchange Commission of bribery. The news spooks Adani Group stocks and leads to Adani Green to scrap its bond offering.
Legal experts say US laws allow for settlement of charges and Adani Group could exercise this option, but the fines will likely be heavy. Some see the seriousness of charges impacting investor confidence and posing challenges for fresh financing.
UPL strikes a deal with global investor Alpha Wave Global to invest $350 million in its seeds platform Advanta at a post-money valuation of $2.85 billion. The move, along with funds from a rights issue, will help pay the agrochemical major's debt.
Indian rupee fell to yet another record low of 84.45 per dollar on sustained selling by foreign funds. Dealers say RBI continues to supply dollars but is selling less as intensity of dollar demand has lessened. You're watching us here on Halftime Report. Good afternoon. I'm Manglam Malu. With me, Hormaz Fatakia. As you can see at the top of our screens, all the indices are in the red, but nothing really to worry about because barring a few pockets, the market's actually seen a fair amount of recovery from the lows, almost 100 points for the Nifty. The Nifty bank a lot more, over 300, 350 odd points. And the mid-cap index, if we stay on for slightly longer with this screen on the top of our heads, you would probably see the mid-cap index move into the green as well, with stocks far outnumbering, the stocks which are gaining, the stocks declining. But at the same time, at an index level, it has flattened out. So we'll keep an eye out on that. But the story of the day so far has been the Adani Group stocks, all of them deep in red territory, having lost about 2.5 lakh crore of market cap, as a US court and the Securities and Exchange Commission have charged Gautam Adani and other executives of bribery and fraud. Hormaz, my co-anchor, joins in with more details on that story and also the company's response. Hormaz.
It's been news of the day, right? All the Adani Group stocks are down anywhere between 20 to 25% as we speak. And it's been the order that has come from the US District Court as well as the Securities Exchange Commission. They have indicted Gautam Adani and other group executives on bribery charges, and they pertain to some solar energy contracts. Now, what the SEC order has also highlighted is the $750 million bond sale that Adani Green had done in September of 2021, of which a certain portion was raised from US investors as well. Now, in response to these developments, Adani Green earlier this morning called off their US dollar denominated bond sale that they were about to carry out. Now, GQG, which is one of the largest shareholders in the Adani Group, the earlier investors as well at the heights of the Hindenburg scandal, they put out a statement saying that they are evaluating these recent developments, portfolio action as well. GQG shares were down 20% in Australian trading. So these are the responses that have come in. But the district court order has a lot of granularity as well. Now, what they're saying is that the US issuer and the Indian energy company subsidiary won and were issued the letter of award for manufacturing linked solar tenders by the Solar Energy Corporation. Now, the US issuer had agreed to supply 4 gigawatts of power to the SECI, and the Indian energy company subsidiary had agreed to supply 8 gigawatts of power to SECI. Now, SECI was responsible to find the state electricity distribution companies that would purchase the 12 gigawatts that both the companies combined were supposed to produce and supply. Now, at the time of the award, the size and the scope of the project was amongst the largest global solar energy projects on record. And Adani Green had also issued a release in this regard in June of 2020. And the US issuer had also published a media release announcing that 4 gigawatt order with a statement that had come in from Ranjit Gupta. And he mentioned that this is a large pipeline of over 4 gigawatts over an extended period of time. And over the next 20 years, this project will lead to a profit after tax of $2 billion is what the statement had said. Now, who are these state-run entities that have been named in this order? There are some of them: the Chhattisgarh State Power Distribution Company, the Tamil Nadu Generation and Distribution Corporation, Gridco, Jammu and Kashmir Power Corporation, and 3 entities from Andhra Pradesh: Andhra Pradesh Central Power Distribution Corporation, Andhra Pradesh Eastern Power Distribution Company, and Southern Power Distribution Company are the entities that have been named. What the district court is also saying is that both these companies had signed PPAs with the SECI between October of 21 and February of 22. And the US issuer was supposed to supply 650 megawatt of power for Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu, Odisha and JNK to the SECI, and 2.3 gigawatts was to be supplied to Andhra Pradesh, is what they're saying. And the Indian energy company executed its own PPAs with the SECI to supply power to these states that I've mentioned. Now, at the end, the 5 counts of which they have been charged. Count 1 is conspiracy to violate the FCPA. Count 2 is the securities fraud conspiracy. Count 3 is the wire fraud conspiracy. Count 4 is the securities fraud, which is pertaining to the 2021 144A bond. And count 5 is conspiracy to obstruct justice. So these are the 5 counts that the US District Court order has laid out. And this is showing up in the reaction to the Adani Group companies. Adani Ports, Adani Enterprises, both down over 20%. And the group as a whole has lost over 2.5 lakh crore in market cap as of now.
Take that point, Ormas. Thanks a lot for that. So this is something that we'll most definitely keep an eye out on, starting sentiments a little bit. And in any way, the market is in the mood for selling any sort of rally on any sort of news that comes by. So we'll keep an eye out on the fundamental impact of that as well. But we also spoke with top corporate lawyers on the Adani Group's indictment in the United States and how it can impact the company's future as well as the shareholder wealth as well. Let's hear that opinion out.
This is the first time there is a criminal indictment from a bribery charges. The Indian courts had not looked at the Adani Group from that perspective deeply. So the allegations were more to do with the minimum public shareholding, violation of securities law. But this is a much more serious allegation from a perspective of bribing public officials, bribing to get contracts, etc. Long-only funds would shy away from this because of their reputation, from taking positions or would unwind their positions. 3, even project financing for Adani Group will become very difficult. And so because they have announced a slew of projects for them to raise funding from many agencies or many investors or banks could become difficult if these charges stick and there is this reputation issue. And the cost of borrowing will also increase phenomenally.
There would be wider implications because this is a very serious charge of bribery, and it's an indictment which is done by the U.S. District Court. Apart from that, the SEC has also come up with certain allegations. So certainly there will be attempt to come to a settlement, and heavy fines will be definitely imposed. That's what I'm sure about, if the charges can ultimately stand. So it will definitely have an impact on the Indian market and Indian shareholders, because certainly the money will have to come from Indian companies. Even if we have to settle and pay a hefty fine, which will run into millions of dollars, it will definitely impact the Indian businesses and ultimately the Indian shareholders.
There is a process of settlement as well under the US law in case there are allegations on the FCPA or under the bribery laws in the US. So I don't think this is anything which is worrisome. It's like a fizz. And yes, allegations are there. There have been some observations here and there in relation to bribery allegations. But to my mind, there's nothing earth-shattering in this. It's always possible to settle this, and the dust will settle down.
And there will be ramifications on the Indian political system once the names of those received bribes from the Adani Group are revealed, says Nirmalya Kumar, who's the professor at the Singapore Management University. Listen to what he had to say.
This is very surprising. To tell you the truth, this is huge news. It's about as big a business news as you can get coming out of India. And the context is, it's one thing to have charges or some whispers like the Hindenburg report. It's another thing to have the US justice infrastructure go after you and come with a criminal indictment, as well as say that they have evidence from electronic devices, which, it seems to indicate that not only were there WhatsApp messages and PowerPoint presentations which talked about how much money is going to be paid and to whom. So obviously, at some level, the US system does have now some names which are associated with the intended recipients, perhaps, of these $250 million bribes. And if that comes out into the open, this can have ramifications for the entire Indian political system, because we don't know who's on that list. The fact of the matter is that the Adani Group is now highly restricted, I suspect, in terms of his international expansion and raising money overseas. There were already some whispers and questions about them after the Hindenburg thing, and they did tank. As it is, foreign investment in the Adani Group was relatively limited for a group that size in India. And with this, I don't think they can raise any money overseas for a long time. And the Kenya and the Bangladesh operations that they have were in trouble and are going to be in more trouble. To understand that with China down, the India story is one of the pillars left for people to get excited about right now from a global investor community. I suspect that now with this, there has always been a general wariness among foreign investors about the quality of Indian corporate governance and the institutions that are in charge of regulating them. And I think this cannot help that story.
Right, interesting opinion coming in out there. We'll keep an eye out on any developments that are underway on this particular story. We'll keep you abreast with all the developments. Take a short break right now. Come back. We focus on the markets. Jay Thakkar of ICICI Securities joins in with some trading strategies. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching us here on Halftime Report. The market's down, but not quite out. If you look at it, the F&O standpoint at midday, it is a Thursday. Nifty weekly options expiry playing out. The frontline indices, they've recovered a bit from the low, still sitting with the cut for the Nifty and the Nifty Bank as well, though the recovery in the Nifty Bank has been a lot better. The Nifty Mid-Cap Index is the one which is actually outperforming. At an index level, it's actually flattened out, mildly went into the green. And we do have a bunch of stocks which are actually doing well. Strides is up around 7.5%. We have Nalco, which is up 5.5%, has been doing well all through last 1 month. And Indian Hotels, after the last trading session where the management did guide for good performance in the next 5 years or so, the street is taking note of that. The stock has moved to a fresh record high too. But if you look at, the market itself, there had been a bunch of sells on rallies which took place, and as a result of which, those who thought that maybe 23,500 would hold on as a support are now caught on the wrong side. They're unwinding their positions. Just for today, the 23,300 put writers are fairly active, telling you that maybe at lower levels, 23,300, we would see a strong amount of support. But at higher levels, a little over 23,350 is where resistance comes in. Why do I say that? Because for options that expire today, we still have nearly 3 crore shares in open interest, 2.99 crore of which have been built today itself for a premium of around 18-20 rupees, telling you upwards of 23,370, we might face some resistance. If we do not face that resistance, then we'll obviously see a bigger short covering pop towards the end of trade. Speaking about a bunch of stocks, REC and PFC, both of them have seen some fresh short additions, and Nalco, by virtue of doing very well and a lot of open interest built up, I'll keep an eye out on whether it goes into F&O ban or not today, because that's what the positioning so suggests. So watch out for that.
And keep an eye out on Nalco. Has been an outperformer in recent times. Thanks a lot for that, Mangalam. And Jay Thakkar now of ICICI Securities is joining in for a quick chart check on the markets. Jay, good afternoon. Thank you for joining in. The bulls are trying leaving no stone unturned, if I can say that, to defend that 23,300 mark on the downside. Now, how important is that level, and does a risk reward favor shorting at these levels? What's your call on the index?
Hi, good afternoon to you, Hormaz. Well, I would say that obviously, risk reward is not currently favoring on the short side on the Nifty as of now, unless you get a support, Hormaz, I would say, from the banking pack. And there you see, the kind of recovery which you are saying, it went below 50,000 levels, but then there has been a smart recovery today, and it's almost back to 50,500 now. So Bank Nifty almost has been trading within this band of 50,000 to 51,000, and I think until Monday it might just trade within this band, wherein we have MSCI finally rejig happening, and until that happens, I think it might just trade within this range. And till the time Bank Nifty is not giving up or closing convincingly below 50,000, risk reward would not be favorable on shorting Nifty at these levels. So I think there can be a good bounce back from the current levels, at least until 23,450, 500 positionally. And Bank Nifty has a very critical support on 50,000 on a closing basis. So till Bank Nifty doesn't break and close below 50,000 Hormaz, I would say shorting at current levels would not be an ideal strategy. Rather, having a contra bet on the extreme at the lower levels, buying there and selling at the higher levels should be a good strategy. That is taking a contra bet at the extremes.
Buy lower, sell higher is the advice from Jay. But in light of this, Jay, what are the stocks that you're recommending this afternoon?
Sure, Hormaz. The first buy recommendation, I have both the buy recommendations rather. So first one is on the back of short covering or a bounce back. That's on Alchem. And as a disclaimer, I would say that we have recommended this to our clients as well. So LCAM has a very good positioning around the levels of 5500 to 5550 on the downside. I think that's a very critical support until those levels are held. The possibility of this stock bouncing back to 5750 is quite high. So here you see the risk reward is quite in favor of the bulls. With a stop loss of 5550, one can buy LCAM Lab for a target of 5750. And a second buy recommendation would be on Indian hotels. Now here is where we have seen Hormaz a very clear long build up seen in this series, and the stock is just not giving up. We are seeing continuously long build up out here. So even at these levels, I think Indian hotels can be bought with a stop loss of 775 positionally, and one can target 840 to 860 going forward.
To another is Indian Hotels. Jay, thanks a lot for joining in, sharing with us your views on the index and on specific stocks as well. Time for a short break. Up next, we get you an exclusive conversation with Deepak Shadatpuri, the MD and founder of DSG Consumer Partners, on the sidelines of CNBC TV18's Global Leadership Summit. Stay tuned. Back on the other side.
Welcome back. You're watching us here on Halftime Report in our special segment Fund Race, where we speak about, everything that's taking place in the world of PE VC funding. We get in important voices as well. So Fund Race, is our special segment which we had started before the results season. And now that the results are done, it'll be interesting to get some insights coming in out there as well. And speaking about those insights too, we have a word coming in from Deepak Shadatpuri, the MD and founder of DSG Consumer Partners, among the earliest in investing in a lot of these D2C brands. And we spoke about the recent urban slowdown, legacy versus insurgent brands, and where the funds are going. This, of course, is from the sidelines of the CNBC TV18 Global Leadership Summit.
With 1.4 billion people, with the growth in GDP, with the growth in per capita GDP, consumption spending will increase, but nothing goes up in a straight line. On the question of sort of legacy brands versus sort of insurgent brands, the data and the research we've done has shown that insurgent brands or successful insurgent brands grow on average 3 times faster than legacy brands. We target a more sophisticated consumer who's looking for something different, and the marketing and the sort of narrative for those brands are sort of exciting to the consumer. And again, think of the base, right? The base is small, so the growth rates are much higher. Legacy brands are large, but the base is huge. I think over the next 10 or 15 years, you will continue to see new insurgent brands sort of take market share from the large companies. And you'll see how large companies sort of navigate the space the same way they've done in the US and in Europe.
World over, there is a trend that insurgent brands are going ahead and acquiring legacy brands in all segments except the consumer space. It's in the consumer space where the power lies with and the cash lies with the legacy brands who go ahead and acquire brands, insurgent brands, which struggle to scale beyond a certain level. Do you think that happens here in India as well over the next 10 years?
It has happened and it will happen. And it's not only because insurgent brands are struggling. So think about Tata's acquisition of Ching's earlier this year. Right. Ching's is a highly successful, fast-growing, profitable brand. It wasn't struggling. It's just that the large incumbent brands, whether it's the Indian MNCs or the global MNCs, they have realized that consumers want diversity, they want different brands, and therefore, if you can't beat them at the game, either you have two choices: either start a brand to sort of compete with yourself, or acquire a brand that has competed with you and taken market share away from you. And what we've seen around the world is that the large strategics have continued to buy young insurgent consumer brands. And what's most interesting is they've started buying smaller companies earlier in their life. So what used to happen was if your revenue was sub 100, 200 million, the large MNCs wouldn't bother. That's all changing. So you'll see companies as small as 20, 30, 40 million now being acquired by the Unilevers, the L'Oreals, the Tatas, ITCs. It's coming, and you're going to see lots more of it.
As an early investor in some of these insurgent brands, and someone who looks at the space very closely, has been doing that for decades, if you had one piece of advice to give to the legacy brands and one piece of advice to give to the insurgent brands, to the legacy brands to grow faster and the insurgent brands to scale up a lot more.
I think brands have one job. Brands have to talk to the consumer, listen to the consumer, and work with the consumer. The consumers are telling you something. They want something different, something new, a change. So The ecosystem needs to work together. The best consumer brands, whether they are insurgents or the legacy brands, are now working in the same ecosystem. So you have the Unilevers, the Nestle's, the L'Oreal's investing in legacy brands. Many of them work with us, invest in young insurgent brands, help them grow. They may or may not acquire them, but they know that if you do right by the consumer, in the long term it will pay off.
What about the near-term urban slowdown that we're seeing? Do you have a comment on that? You do speak to a lot of startups.
You know, we are seeing it across our portfolio. The premium products continue to grow. There is a slowdown last 4 quarters across our brands in sort of the value segment. Again, I think sentiment is soft. It's been soft for 4 quarters. I think there'll be another 2 quarters of soft sentiment. But you know, Indians are very excited. They are very positive. They are very bullish. We're one of the fastest growing economies in the world with a very large base. So it's a question of when. And when we have this conversation in 12 months, you'll ask me the other question: why are we growing that quickly?
Well, you know, while that is happening, there's also a function of how much, right? When is one question of the growth, but how much you're paying is another question. Valuations have been through the roof over the last, couple of years or so.
You know, India has always been an expensive market. I started investing in consumer in India in 2001. I just come from London, and it took me 3 years to recalibrate my mind to the fact that every listed Indian company was trading at a 30 to 40% premium to the global multiple. Was that justified? It looks like the growth has paid off. So I think in the short term, given how excited investors are about India, things may have run, but I think the growth will catch up. But again, as an investor in early stage brands, right, we have a 10-year view. So whether you're paying a little more or a little less, the growth will sort of work out if you pick the right brands, grow in a very capital efficient manner, and not sort of, don't foie gras it. Don't take cash to buy top line, just build it sustainably.
All right, and final question then, 3 companies that you are betting on to be very, very big over the next 5 to 10 years. They may or may not have been in your portfolio.
You know, it's tough. The ones in my portfolio are the ones I watch very closely. But again, let me take, I'm very excited by Boat. It's not in my portfolio. It's a company I sort of saw and I passed on because I was sort of hesitant to do anything in the hardware space, but they've proved to be a fantastic brand. Consumers love them. I would say Viba, which is in my portfolio, very fast growing, got to 1,000 crores in 10 years, no debt. Watch out for what Viba will be doing as it sort of takes on not only other insurgent brands, but the legacy brands. And I think what is going to happen, I'm trying to think of something in the beauty and personal care brand. I think a Plum or a Sugar, because as consumers become wealthier, they spend a lot more on personal care. So I think one of the large sort of fast-growing Sugars or Plums of the world would be a company to watch out for.
I'm surprised you didn't name any of the QCom players.
You know, QCom to me, again, is a...
All right, we'll cut out of that conversation also to get across to Rahul Gandhi, who is currently holding a press conference.
अदानी जी और मोदी एक हैं तो सेफ है. हिंदुस्तान में अदानी जी का कुछ नहीं किया जा सकता. चीफ मिनिस्टर 10-15 करोड़ के लिए अंदर चले जाते हैं और अदानी जी 2000 करोड़ रुपए का स्कैम करते हैं और वो बाहर घूम रहे हैं. कारण है कि प्रधानमंत्री उनको प्रोटेक्ट कर रहे हैं. अमेरिका में अब अदानी पावर, मोदी पावर, पता नहीं कौन सा चल रहा है, बट दोनों एक हैं. अमेरिका में इंडाइटमेंट हुआ है अदानी जी को. 2000 करोड़ रुपए का स्कैम है. हिंदुस्तान में उन्होंने क्राइम किया है, अमेरिका में क्राइम किया है. ये अमेरिका के इन्वेस्टिगेशन ने कहा है, मगर हिंदुस्तान में अदानी जी के खिलाफ कुछ नहीं हो रहा. और ये हम मांग बहुत दिनों से कर रहे हैं. अदानी जी का अरेस्ट होना चाहिए, आज अरेस्ट होना चाहिए. माधवी बुच जो हैं, जो उनकी प्रोटेक्टर हैं, जिन्होंने कोई इन्वेस्टिगेशन नहीं किया, उनको हटाया जाना चाहिए, उन पर इन्वेस्टिगेशन होना चाहिए। आपके सवाल हो तो पूछिए। वन बाय वन।
मंडे से संसद का शीतकालीन सत्र आरंभ हो रहा है। क्या नेता प्रतिपक्ष के तौर पर आप व्यक्तिगत तौर पर इस विषय को उठाएंगे लोकसभा के?
नहीं, देखिए, हम इस मुद्दे को उठा रहे हैं। मेरी जिम्मेदारी है एज एलओपी इस मुद्दे को उठाना। प्रधानमंत्री जी 100% इस व्यक्ति की प्रोटेक्शन कर रहे हैं और इस व्यक्ति ने हिंदुस्तान के एसेट्स लिए हैं, भ्रष्टाचार करके एसेट्स लिए हैं। ये व्यक्ति बीजेपी को पूरा समर्थन करते हैं, पूरा सपोर्ट देते हैं। ये एस्टेब्लिश चीजें हैं। हम दोहराते जाएंगे। जेपीसी की मांग हमारी है, बट हम चाहते हैं कि अदानी जी को एकदम अरेस्ट किया जाए। और हम जानते हैं और हम देश को दिखाना चाहते हैं कि अदानी जी की अरेस्ट नहीं होगी। और इसलिए नहीं होगी क्योंकि हिंदुस्तान के प्रधानमंत्री अदानी जी के पीछे खड़े हुए हैं और उनके प्रोटेक्टर हैं। आप लोग, हिंदुस्तान के युवा, आप लोगों को रोजगार नहीं मिलता, महंगाई बढ़ती जाती है, छोटा सा कोई क्राइम करता है, जेल चला जाता है, मगर अदानी कुछ भी कर ले, हिंदुस्तान के प्रधानमंत्री और एक नेटवर्क, जिस नेटवर्क को हम एक्सपोज करके देश को दिखाएंगे। ये एक व्यक्ति नहीं है, ये अलग अलग पोजीशंस में लोग बैठे हुए हैं और एक एक करके हम आपको दिखाएंगे ये कौन लोग हैं। माधवी बुच का हमने आपको क्लियरली दिखाया है और आगे भी हम आपको रिवील करेंगे ये लोग कौन हैं जिन्होंने हिंदुस्तान को हाईजैक किया है।
यही पूछना चाह रही थी कि जेपीसी की मांग पर क्या विपक्ष के तमाम पार्टियों से भी आपकी बात हुई है? इस पर आप कोशिश करेंगे आने वाले सत्र में?
जेपीसी इज इंपॉर्टेंट, जेपीसी होनी चाहिए, मगर अब सवाल यह है कि अदानी जी जेल के बाहर क्यों हैं? अगर कोई भी क्राइम करता है तो नरेंद्र मोदी का कहना है वो उसको अंदर कर देते हैं। और ये जो व्यक्ति हैं जिनको अमेरिकन एजेंसी ने कहा है कि इन्होंने क्राइम किया है और अमेरिकन एजेंसी ने कहा है कि इन्होंने हिंदुस्तान में क्राइम किया है, ब्राइब्स दी हैं, पावर को महंगा बेचा है, ये सब वहां बोला जा रहा है और प्रधानमंत्री यहां कुछ नहीं कर रहे हैं। और मैं आपको बताता हूं कुछ नहीं कर सकते। अगर वो करना भी चाहें वो नहीं कर सकते हैं क्योंकि वो अदानी जी के कंट्रोल में है। ये मेरा मेन मैसेज देश को ये है, जेपीसी है, अदानी जी के अरेस्ट है, मगर मैं जनता को कहना चाहता हूं, आप नोट कीजिए, स्कैम किया है 2000 करोड़ रुपए का, मगर मैं आपको गारंटी देके कह रहा हूं ये व्यक्ति ना अरेस्ट होगा ना इस पे इन्वेस्टिगेशन होगा क्योंकि प्रधानमंत्री इसके साथ जुड़े हुए हैं।
मौसमी
राहुल जी, आपने कहा कि प्रधानमंत्री की एक तरीके से साठगांठ है और लगातार आपका जो स्टैंड है वो विंडिकेट कहीं ना कहीं हुआ। क्या आपको लगता है, क्योंकि आप कह रहे हैं कि इनको अरेस्ट होना चाहिए भारत में भी, जो राज्य सरकारें हैं और जो रिपोर्ट आई है, जो फैसला है, उसमें भी कई राज्य सरकारों की संलिप्ति है जिन्होंने ब्राइब ली है, तो क्या जो राज्य सरकारें हैं, चाहे वो कर्नाटक सरकार हो, तेलंगाना ने एमओयू साइन किया 2024 इकोनॉमिक फोरम में, क्या प्रोएक्टिव कदम लेके आप अपनी सरकारों को संदेश देंगे?
बिल्कुल अदानी जी का अरेस्ट होना चाहिए और जो भी इस मामले में इन्वॉल्व है उस पर कार्रवाई होनी चाहिए, चाहे वो कहीं का भी हो, कोई भी हो।
हाँ सिद्धार्थ,
आपने स्टेट्स के नाम लिए, राजस्थान भी इसमें इन्वॉल्व है। कुछ ही महीने पहले बीजेपी की सरकार ने इसी तरीके का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट राजस्थान में किया, एंड विच इज द अदर स्टेट, एंड महाराष्ट्र में भी बीजेपी की सरकार ने ऐसा ही कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किया है। वही कॉन्ट्रैक्ट छत्तीसगढ़ में था। तो मेरा कहना है जहां भी ये हुआ है, चाहे ऑपोजिशन की सरकार हो, चाहे बीजेपी की सरकार हो, इन्वेस्टिगेशन होना चाहिए, पनिशमेंट होनी चाहिए, मगर मेन बात है जो किंग पिन है, जो सेंटर है, उसको जेल में जाना चाहिए, अरेस्ट होना चाहिए और उसका इन्वेस्टिगेशन होना चाहिए, इंटरोगेशन होना चाहिए, पता लगाना चाहिए कि इसके पीछे कौन है।
Welcome back. You're watching Halftime Report, shifting focus to the oil and gas sector now. Dayanand Mittal, the oil and gas telecom research analyst at JM Financial Institutional Securities, now joins us from the sidelines of the JM Financial India Conference 2024. Dayanand, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining in. You know, the recent developments surrounding these city gas distributors with yet another cut to their allocation on the APM gas. What do you make of this, and do you believe that is there enough for these companies to cover up from the potential losses that will come in from this cut in allocation yet again?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. So yeah, this is a big shock for all these CNG dominated CGD companies like IGL, MGL. The current gap versus petrol for CNG is about 40-45% in terms of cost per kilometer, rupees per kilometer basis. So there is scope for them to take price hikes. Our sense is they might be forced to pass on the large part of this increase in gas cost to end consumers, somewhere between 6 to 8 rupee, if not immediately, maybe gradually over the next few months. Otherwise, there will be a sharp hit to their margins. But as a result, the cost competitiveness of CNG might moderate sharply from 40-45% currently, and from peak of 60% plus 2-3 years back, to more like 35% versus petrol. Versus diesel, it will drop sharply from 20% to more like 15%. So this will definitely have some moderating impact on volume growth from a more medium to long term. Near term may not be much, but from medium to long term, this will moderate volume growth. And this will be a structural issue given the APM allocation will keep on declining every year by 5-7%. Given all this APM gas will get reallocated as new well gas, which will be about 20-25% expensive versus APM. So this will be kind of a perpetual issue for the CGD companies over the next few years.
So a two-part question then, Dayanand. One, I wanted to know if you've done any sort of sensitivity analysis on, how much an increase, how much of a price increase impacts the volume and margins of these companies. And the second part, now since you're saying this will be a issue which will continue for these companies, do you think there is case for structural derating of the multiple that you give to them? If yes, then what should then the new normal be?
Yeah, so obviously, as we discussed, the competitiveness versus petrol will moderate from 45% currently to more like 35% versus diesel from 20% to 15%. Difficult to put a number, but empirical studies suggest versus diesel, you need at least 15% plus, ideally 25% for customers to get incentivized to convert to CNG, and versus petrol at least 30-35%. So now this differential is at the lower end of that range. So though existing customers who have switched to CNG, for them it's a sunk cost, so they will keep on using CNG, as CNG is still economical versus petrol diesel, but new customers will be now under doubt, a bit hesitant, and hence volume growth that we used to see for these CGD companies, let's say terminal volume growth of 4-5% for IGL, MGL may get moderated by a couple of percentage points, so more like 2-3%. Difficult to put a number, but yeah, there would be definitely some moderating impact in terms of volume growth going forward. In terms of derating, yes, it's a big derating event, more than earning cut, given they can pass on most of this to end consumers. So earning cut may be limited at 10-15%, but the biggest challenge is the derating event, because this raises question on whether government's favorable policy stance towards CNG business, given it's more environmental friendly, whether there's a U-turn there or not. So there's a lot of doubts now as to what led to this sudden U-turn in government policies. Also, given there are a lot of press report quoting government sources that government will look into all the CGD companies' cost structure to decide how much of CNG price hike they should take, given they make significantly higher profit in the past. So that also raises question marks on what's the government intent here is.
So how much should the multiples derate by according to you? And how much have you taken?
Yeah. So we valued on a DCF basis. So the for implied multiple for IGL, MGL, for IGL would have gone down for us from more like 17, 18 times, let's say FY27 earnings to more like 12, 13 times now. Similarly for MGL from 15 times to more like 10, 11 times now. So almost a 30-40% de-rating that we've seen in our target multiples.
All right, Dayanand, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for sparing time and joining us with your views on these city gas distributors, a big de-rating event coming in for these companies. Time for a short break. More on the markets and specific stocks on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching us on a halftime report. The Nifty continues to remain around that 23,330 mark as we speak, and the Adani Group stocks too continuing to trade with double-digit losses, at least most of them. Adani Enterprises, Adani Ports, all of them continuing to trade with losses there. Adani Enterprises now down 19%. At one point was down 23%. Adani Ports has seen a recovery from the lows. At one point was down over 20% as well. But Adani Green continues to remain 19% lower. Adani Energy is down 20%. Most of the stocks still trading with double-digit losses. Some stocks that are bucking the trend, though, are Amber Enterprises. That is the top gainer on the mid-cap index, 6.5% higher for that stock, and that too continuing to grow from strength to strength, still significantly away from its 52-week high, but is still outperforming in a rather weak market, 6.5% higher there for Amber Enterprises. And Nalco, the one stock that Mangalam highlighted, which may enter into the F&O ban, and that stock too is among the top gainers on the mid-cap index, 4.5% higher for Nalco. Take a short break. Back with more on the markets on the other side.
Well, like we pointed out, 23,350 is a place where a lot of the call writers are fairly active. So difficult for the Nifty to cross that 23,350 mark considerably. And as a result of which, we've seen the market moderate back to 23,330 thereabouts for the Nifty itself. What's interesting, though, in the last half an hour or so, the mid-cap index, which almost went into the green for a brief period, has now come off the highs once again and currently at, a cut of almost 1/3% out there. What are the stocks which are seeing a bit of a sell-off in the mid-cap end of things itself? We have IDFC First Bank, which is moved to the lower end of today's trading range so far. Alongside that, we have, something like a Voltas as well. That too has corrected about 2% from the highs, currently at the low point of trade. No such concerns for a lot of these cash-related names which are doing extremely well. So Zaggle Prepaid, for instance, is up around 5%. Restaurants brand Asia, which is the owner of Burger King in India and a couple of geographies in the Southeast Asia as well, that stock up around 5%. We're seeing decent traction in names like Ami Organics and VIP as well. VIP has been a bit of an underperformer over the last, many months or so, many quarters. The stock is down 27% from its 52-week high, but today seeing some traction. And the other one that stands out is Cross, a recent listing. KROSS is the stock that we're talking about, up around 8% with a fair amount of volumes on that one too. And this week itself, that stock is up nearly 31% on the back of results. So we'll keep an eye out on all these broader market stocks which are doing well, even as the frontliners are struggling. The Nifty Bank down almost 0.8%. We wrap up on this edition of Halftime Report. You stay tuned. Business Lunch comes up ahead.